God was fair, we would be on the cross, not him.
As a leader, you cannot be inward focused constantly. You need to be self-aware. You need to realize where you're at. But your focus needs to be upon the Lord and upon the people that he's called you to serve.
Sometimes I think the repeated has become redundant.
Routine can be heartfelt.
Genesis 1, the 5th word ever written in the Bible, was created. We too were created to be creators.
Yes, the itinerary and the calendar's so full that, they use Sunday to, instead of going to church in the morning,
Now you're
just
preaching.
I just got to rest. No, you need to be in church.
Yeah.
Hold on now you're actually talking to people, right? Because
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Mantle Moments Podcast, where we talk life, leadership, and ministry through real father-son conversations. If that sounds like something you're interested in, go ahead and stick around, and welcome to the podcast. As a reminder, the best way to help out the show is to subscribe to the channel and leave us a 5-star review if you find it valuable to you. And without further ado, let's get into the episode. Welcome back, everybody, to episode 2 of the Mantle Moments Podcast. Today's a good day because we made it to episode 2.
you made it to episode 2, and today we're talking about something that every leader will face, even when we don't realize it, and that's dragons that are crouching at our door.
We're going to get into the dragons, but I do want to be transparent and honest with the audience today. So if you watched last episode, I think Dad had made a reference about no makeup or anything like that on set. I'm trying to be funny, but today we have makeup on set. Do you care to share?
Yeah, there is makeup on set, and there's makeup on my forehead, because what happened is in Jackson, there was a thin coat of ice everywhere, all throughout the city, and I stepped out to take our little puppy Lambo out, slipped, hit my head on the step, almost knocked myself out. I was dazed and confused, and got a big goose egg on my head, so had to do some makeup before the pod, man.
So, hey, we are officially an official podcast at this point because we broke out the makeup today.
Absolutely.
So that's good news. But okay, let's get into the crouching dragons we're going to be talking about today. When we hear dragons crouching at leader's door, the topic we're going to talk about today, everybody may not know what we're talking about. So let's reference the analogy we're talking about today. It's an old-time analogy, something I wasn't aware of until you brought it up. So I'm going to let you take it from here and explain what that analogy is.
Yeah, it's in the Bible in the Old Testament, Genesis chapter 4, and there were 2 brothers, Cain and Abel, and both of them brought offerings before the Lord. And the Bible tells us that God was pleased with Abel's offering, but not with Cain's. And Cain felt a certain way about that, as most of us would. And it wasn't the way that he felt about it that got him in trouble. But God noticed that, that he just wasn't himself. And he basically comes down, and I'm paraphrasing, but he says, hey, Cain, man, what's going on? Fix your face. Something's not right. And then what I love is that God warns him. Cain didn't see it. Cain didn't understand what was happening in his life, but God gives him this warning and says, why are you angry? And he says, if you do not do well, sin is crouching at your door, and its desire is to have you. It's contrary to you. It's trying to take you out. You must rule over it. And then Cain ignores this warning, and he ends up going out in the field, having words with his brother, and he ends up killing his brother, murdering him.
Yeah. So, I mean, great story, great lesson we can learn about those small things that could sneak in and be big things in our lives. What was the analogy you had made? You had preached a sermon called Paper Tigers and Crouching Dragons, a series.
Yeah. Yep.
So when we talk about the paper tiger, you reference that those are big things that seem scary, but really their roar is really quiet.
Right.
And then you talked about the crouching dragons being those things that seem really small, but could add up to be big things in our life.
Absolutely. It's the things that we don't put enough time or concern into that could end up destroying our lives.
And those are the things that we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely.
So I'm pumped to get into it. I know that just looking at our notes that we've prepared, that these are things that have impacted my life in just the short 24 years I've had. And I'm excited to kind of hear how they may have impacted your life growing up as well, in your much longer life.
Much longer life that almost ended today on the ice.
Yeah.
The ice is a little bit like a crouching dragon.
Especially black ice.
I didn't see it.
Mhm.
I had no idea it was there.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't concerned about it. I stepped out in my Uggs to take the dog out.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing you know, it took me down and the fall was hard.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing crouching dragons can do.
Yeah.
You won't even realize they're there, that you won't even see them unless there's a warning sign that you learn to pick up on. And man, they'll take you down fast.
It's those small things that if they go unchecked and unmaintenanced, like putting salt on the sidewalk, right?
Right.
Those things that'll take you out and knock you out.
Yeah, like, I don't know if you've ever seen these old treasure maps and
Mhm.
things like this, but
Mhm.
there's this old Latin phrase, hic sunt dracones, right?
Big.
It's big, and it simply means, here be dragons,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that the Lord, through prayer and through revelation, he gives us these warnings like, here be dragons. As you read the Bible, you can see these dragons that are subtle, but if you don't take care of them, they'll take you out.
So we got 3 dragons we're going to talk about today.
Just 3.
Just
All right.
I think it'll be, if more come up, that's fine.
Yeah.
3 in our notes that we want to talk about for sure. And the first one of those is entitlement.
Right.
That's something that we had both agreed could very easily be a small thing that creeps into our lives, but bring some devastating outcomes in our lives if we let it get too far.
Yeah, entitlement, it always starts with a thought, not an action, right?
What does it sound like? I'm curious what you think
I
entitlement sounds like.
think entitlement always says, I deserve this.
Mm-hmm.
I deserve this.
Yeah. I've
Mhm.
earned it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think there's a difference between the mindset of I deserve this and I've earned it, though?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, maybe a small one. When I think about it in my life, they kind of overlap because I've the feeling of I've earned this starts to churn into I deserve this because I've earned it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
there's a little bit of overlap in it to me, but I do think they could be different. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's some overlap there. I think I deserve this is the epitome of entitlement, right? I think I earn this can turn into entitlement if you don't leave the results up to God,
Yeah.
right? I think that I've earned this is good. You and I both believe in having strong work ethics, right? So I think that can be a very good, a very powerful thing. I think that we should, and I think there are things in life that we can earn, but the issue comes is that when we begin to see ourselves as sovereign
Mm-hmm.
instead of God. Well, I've done this, so God, you owe me that. That is entitlement.
Yeah, that's a really good thought. Do you think that we try to justify, entitlement?
We try to justify all of our behaviors.
Yeah,
Yeah, so-
absolutely. That's how the brain works.
So yeah, we try to justify entitlement in all kinds of ways.
Mhm.
We'll take a look at other people that may be at a different station in life and we'll say, well, like I work harder than they do,
Yeah.
and yet they're further along, and we will try to justify things in that way.
I think sometimes we can disguise entitlement as fairness as a way of trying to justify it in our brain as well.
Yeah.
But really it's just pride underneath the
Mhm.
surface. And I think about that phrase, fair, this isn't fair. And I'm
Mhm.
so thankful that God's not fair all
Right.
the time.
Absolutely.
I've seen something online that's really powerful is that if God was fair, we would be on the cross, not him. So not Jesus. So yeah, I think that's a really dangerous phrase to say is, this isn't fair.
Mhm.
Life's not fair because, well, if it was, we would be on the cross, not Jesus.
Right. I think that's why the Bible talks about God being just.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He's a just God.
Oh my goodness. I'm glad you brought that up. Yesterday in my reading, I was reading about David.
Uh-huh.
And, you see David and you see God's grace through his life. But you also see a bit of God's, just in David's life.
Mhm.
Because there was something I was reading, and it was talking about how when David screwed up, God was basically like, okay, you got 3 options.
None of them were good.
No, none of them were good. They were all punishments.
Right.
But he still gave David 3 options to choose from.
Right.
And I think that's a perfect example of we do serve a just God, but we also serve a graceful one.
Mhm.
And, being in the Old Testament before Jesus, I thought that was a perfect example of God's grace to even allow David the choice to choose what punishment he was going
Right.
to go through.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great example of that.
Why do you think entitlement's so dangerous for leaders?
Well, at that point, it's a mindset. And if you are truly a leader, right, and we don't use that term lightly here on the podcast, but if you're truly a leader, then obviously there are people who are watching you, who are looking up to you. And, for us in the church world, we're leaders in the church, right?
Mhm.
And so if you're a leader by nature, that means that people are following you, right? So if you have that entitled mindset, then that's going to be obvious throughout the whole church or organization or wherever you're leading. And the people are going to follow you into that. So before you know it, you have a whole culture,
Yeah.
whether it's a church culture, a company culture, even a family culture of entitlement. And so as leaders, we need to take that serious. What are you leading people into? You don't want an entire group of people saying, we deserve this. We deserve it.
Could get dangerous real fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think when I think about my life and my short journey on this earth thus far, I can pinpoint some times that entitlement started to kind of creep into my life. The one time I can remember is my senior year of college basketball. Just that feeling of I've deserved this and I've earned this kind of start to creep in. Because I've worked really hard. I made a lot of sacrifices for the team I was on, and at the time we were trying to develop the younger talent as a college coach should, and get them some minutes, as a freshman, and sub them in for me. And I remember my minutes going down slightly my senior year, and that feeling of entitlement started to creep in. Like, I have made so many sacrifices for this team over the years. I left everything I knew to come and make a difference on this team, and that's when I noticed entitlement start to creep in. And actually, it wasn't a Christian book that called me out on it. It was just another book I had picked up and read, and it was called Ego is the Enemy. And it was a really good book.
So Ryan Holiday?
I think so. I think so. And I don't think he's a Christian author.
No, more into stoicism and things like that, I think.
Yeah, but I do remember picking up that book and just feeling really challenged with the topic of entitlement, and it really helped pull me out of it, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think that there was any point in your life that you struggled with entitlement? And do you think somebody called you out on it in that moment? Or did you have a resource like I did, like a book or anything that called you out on it? Maybe like the Bible even?
Yeah.
Yeah, curious to hear your thoughts.
No, I think that there was a point that I went through that in being married to your mom, right? As a husband, I felt entitled to things like, well, I've taken care of you. I'm providing for you. I do this for you and that. And then that entitlement can begin to creep in. And there's probably no more dangerous of a place for entitlement to creep in than in marriage.
Yeah.
Right. So then you talk about the ministry. Sure. I mean, I did student ministry for 18 years. Right. At some point in that 18 years, I thought, yeah, I deserve to have a bigger platform, right? That's entitlement. And I remember getting in that vein a lot. But it seemed to always be prayer, and reading the Bible that would kind of bring me back to center. And your mom is incredible, right? She can call you out in the most loving of ways, right? And so that always helped to bring me back to center when it came to that.
Was there ever a point in ministry that entitlement started to creep in? Like you mentioned the youth ministry, 18 years, and maybe wanting a bigger platform, if you will. Was there anybody that really, called you out on it in the ministry side of things outside of mom?
Yeah. So there was one time in particular where we were in a church leadership meeting, right? And I remember Pastor Rob, and I don't even remember what he was talking about. I think he was talking about the importance of making sure that we turned in all receipts, and it was something financial.
Yeah.
And I remember becoming so angry, like, I've been here, I've been doing this, I serve you, I don't ask for anything in return. And then, I felt like he was getting on to me. I took that so personally that I got up and I walked out of a leadership meeting. One of my biggest failures that I would consider in ministry, and went home and I was angry. I got to thinking about it, and I thought, wow, it wasn't right. It was wrong. There was no excuse for it. I went and apologized to Pastor Rob. I think it was the next day, and he spoke to me, and he said, that's great. He said, but you're not going to preach the next time you're scheduled to preach in the main sanctuary.
Yeah.
And you talked about David, and there were consequences, and these crouching dragons, they'll always have consequences, just like entitlement. And so I was sat down for a while.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Talk about a powerful lesson of and getting corrected in ministry,
right,
when it comes to entitlement.
And I earned that.
Yeah,
I earned that.
Yeah. I think entitlement can be so dangerous too, because it makes you forget of whose life it really is. Like, when entitlement creeps in, you start to think, this is all mine. This life is mine. This ministry is mine. This preaching that I'm about to do when I'm scheduled to preach next time is mine.
Yeah.
And you start to forget whose it really is, and that's the Lord's.
Yeah.
For us Christian leaders. And our life is not our own. Our life is His. And we're just vessels being used for His glory.
Yeah. And it's a great point that you brought up, because entitlement is always inward focused, right? And as a leader, you cannot be inward focused constantly. You need to be self-aware. You need to realize where you're at, but your focus needs to be upon the Lord and upon the people that He's called you to serve. It can't be constantly, well, I deserve this. This is about me. And that's what entitlement is. It's the me monster in full effect.
Yeah. So when entitlement shows up, you mentioned prayer in your word, but what are some ways to kind of get back to humility that you can think of? I know, like, for me, it was just changing my perspective every day, walking into practice. And, honestly, I had to write down things on like a note card to remind me of, like, celebrate others. This isn't about you, we over me. Like, I remember physically writing those out.
That's great that you did that.
Yeah. And I actually had them on my phone. And before every practice, I would look at them and say them to myself. And that started to help me a lot. But is there anything that you can think of that could help people get back to that place of humility when they're kind of trying to get out of that place of entitlement?
Remembering where God has already brought you from.
Yeah.
I think that in the Old Testament, everybody's wanting to leave the past in the past, but there were moments where God said, hey, set out these stones of remembrance is what they were called, right? He said that way you can remember my goodness and the miracles that He worked for the Israelites. And He told them, pass these stories down to your children so they'll remember my goodness. And so one of the best ways for me to battle entitlement is to remember where God has brought me from.
Yeah.
Right. We had a great moment. This past weekend was Valentine's Day. Right. So your mom and I, we did a simple Valentine's Day date. I drove her to the place where I originally proposed to her. Super fancy. It was Brown's Market. It was a gas station. Like, dude, things didn't used to be like they are now.
Yeah.
And so I remember bending down on my knee and proposing to her. But as we were there, your mom noticed, and she looked catty-cornered, and she saw the children's home where I spent basically 4 years of my teenage life. And she brought it up. I had never even noticed. She goes, Chris, just right across the street in a place that, reminds you a lot of the pain and the things you went through as a kid. But right here is where we proposed and we began our brand new life together.
Yeah.
And so it's good to have those places that you can look back to and remember the goodness of God and where He's brought you from.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's really cool how God allowed, Mom to see that, before this episode so you could bring it up.
Right. And of course I joked with her and I said, it's amazing to me that within 1/8 of a mile, I lost my freedom twice.
And probably followed with a punch to the bum shoulder. Yeah. So I think that kind of wraps up dragon number 1. You want to introduce dragon number 2 that we've discussed?
Yeah, so dragon number 2 that we're going to talk about is the dragon of discontentment. And it sounds like, if only I had blank, then I would be happy.
Yes.
Or I would be successful, or I could do more. But it always starts with, if I had this.
Yeah. Oh, man, this is one that I've struggled with a lot of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had a conversation with some of our youth ministry team the other day of how it's something I'm still working on, because I know in my life that something I struggle with is if I don't have something in my life in front of me to strive for,
Mm-hmm.
I start to feel like I'm not doing anything with my life, and I feel a little discontent. And it's like I always seem to have this mindset that I need something else to check mark off my list of I've achieved.
Yeah.
So I can relate to this one a lot, and this is probably the dragon that crouches at my door the most.
Mm-hmm.
What about you? What's discontentment kind of look like in your life? Where have you wrestled with it?
Yeah, I think most recently, that we're getting ready to get into a church building project.
Yeah.
Right. And right now we're in a very small space, and the church is growing and it's thriving and it's healthy. But if I'm not careful and I don't keep myself in check, I can go into, well, if we were just in a bigger building, if we just had a bigger space, if we just had more resources, then we could do. And so that's something that, and I think that that's been coming out in the messages that God's been checking me on, is to celebrate the space where we're at, celebrate this moment. And, what he shared with me just this past week is there will be moments where I actually miss the small spaces. And God says, don't despise small beginnings.
Yeah.
So just he has challenged me just recently to celebrate where we're at.
Yeah. You brought up a good point when you introed it, this dragon, that it sounds like if only I had this, then I'd be happy. What other things do you think that discontentment tells leaders?
Yeah, it tells leaders that God is not enough,
Yeah.
right? What did you mentioned David earlier in the podcast, but what did David say in the Psalm? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, right? And so that is the key to discontentment, is realizing that God has this, right? It doesn't mean that you sit back and do nothing and say, oh Lord, just everything. We do our part in this, but it's being content in every moment. David was anointed king and he went right back out into the field and kept being a shepherd, right?
15 years.
Yeah, for 15 years. And then before he even defeated Goliath, the only reason he was in a position to defeat Goliath was because he delivered some bread and cheese to the front lines of the battle. He was one of those, what do they call those drivers?
Ubers?
No, not an Uber, like the food delivery guys, the food delivery people. Is it Uber Eats?
Uber Eats.
Oh, I'm old, man. I'm old. But yeah, he was like the Uber Eats guy. And he went there willingly. He didn't go there with a bad attitude. He didn't go there with well, if only Dad would send me on bigger things, this king thing would happen a lot quicker.
Well, the same thing with Joseph. He had a huge waiting period as well from the time God gave him the vision, God gave him the dream, that, his brothers would bow down to him one day. And, he had to go through the prison and then the pit, then the prison.
Right.
And yeah, so he had a long waiting period as well. And I think that's a great segue into another lie that discontentment can tell leaders, is that your time's running up.
Yeah.
I think that that's a lie that comes from discontentment from the enemy. He loves to use that lie of, hey man, your time's running up. You're getting too old to do the things that you've dreamed of doing.
Yeah.
And I'm so young, and I'm 24 years old, and that's a lie the enemy whispers into my brain. Like, if you don't do this by 30, you can forget about it.
Right. Time's up. Time's running out.
Yep.
Yeah. All of that.
It's all, like you said, is kind of makes you put God in a box of limitations.
Right.
When you start thinking that way, because it's all based on your self, ability. So yeah. Any other lies you can think of?
Concerning discontentment, I think that the biggest thing is it's almost as if you are taking glory away from God, because you're saying, if I had this material thing, right, then I would be more. No, the reality of it is that we need God in our lives first and foremost. And so the lie is that you need more to be more.
Yeah.
That's the lie of discontentment.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about this in the last podcast, so I don't want to get into it a ton again. But Gen Z, an observation I've noticed with them and myself is that discontentment often roots from the comparison we have on our phone
Right.
with the Instagrams and the highlight reels. Do you think that discontentment is rooted and maybe triggered by different things in the older generations than it is in Gen Z, or do you think it all roots from that comparison?
I think comparison's a big part. I mean, obviously, it's easier to compare in the world today just because it's right in front of your face, right? We used to have to walk outside to see what kind of car the neighbor was driving.
Yeah.
Right? You used to have to actually go places to see, the latest fit that somebody was wearing, and now it's just all right there that to be consumed. So I think comparison is a big driver. I also think that discontentment can be an excuse,
Yeah.
right? Discontentment says, well, this isn't on me, you know? This is because I lack something. And actually, lack can be a superpower.
Yeah.
A lack of resources can be some of your most creative moments in leadership and in ministry.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with that 100%. One thing I've struggled with in my life, though, is how do I differentiate contentment from laziness and idleness? Like, because like when I hear the word content, I always have battled and wrestled with the thought of, well, how do I continue to strive with God-given ambition without it turning into discontentment? Like, is there a balance there?
Yeah, there's a big balance there, but the reality of it is that discontentment, once again, is me focused,
Yeah.
right? And you and I have spoke many times on we don't believe that we're called to sit around and be idle. We're called to go and do something in this world to add value into this world, right? The story of the Tower of Babel, right? They were going to build this huge tower to heaven, but their motives was all wrong, right? God actually said, man, if these people keep speaking the same language, keep having the same voice, nothing's impossible. They'll actually accomplish building this tower into the heaven, right? But what was it for? To make a name for ourselves, right? Discontentment is to make an excuse for yourself, right? It's not, being content doesn't mean to be lazy.
Yeah.
Right? We continue to go and to do the things that God has called us to do, but we realize, God, if you never do another thing for us, we're going to continue on this path that you've called us to until it's time to go to heaven, right? We're going to keep going. Contentment doesn't mean sitting where you're at. It means appreciating where you're at.
Yeah, and I think that perspective is really important and really good to have. Matthew 6, I think it's Matthew 6. I know it's in the book of Matthew, but the verse that says, seek first the kingdom of God and the rest will be added unto you. That's a verse that I've really leaned on with that battle of discontentment that I've had versus,
Yes.
I don't want to be lazy and idle. But like you said, the importance is where's your focus?
Right.
And that verse in Matthew, if you remind yourself of that daily, it's constantly putting the focus of what you do for the kingdom of God and his glory.
Absolutely.
So that's something tangible that I've done in my life is go to that verse often and remind myself of it frequently. Is there any other tangible things that you can maybe help us out with and tell people that they should try when battling this crouching dragon of discontentment?
Gratitude daily.
Yeah.
Gratitude daily.
Like write it out. Would you?
I don't. I mean, I'd love for this to be a podcast where I say, yes, I journal every day, but gratitude for me begins in the morning, waking up, God, thank you. Thank you for another day. Let's go do this thing. God, thank you for my wife. She is such a gift to me because what you're grateful for, you can't take for granted, right? And what you're grateful for, when you stay grateful, you can't be discontented. The two cannot exist at the same time. So for me, it's just gratitude always.
How do you start and how do you remember to do that?
It becomes a habit.
Yeah.
There's same has a bum rap, but there is power in same,
Yeah.
right?
And I've wrestled with that, if I'm being honest, because like when I am praying and doing my gratitude, it seems like I'm saying the same thing every day. that I'm grateful for, and it's like repeated.
Yeah.
And I think what you just said, I can relate to, because sometimes I think the repeated has become redundant.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, am I really being genuine for thanking him for those blessings?
Right.
Or am I just doing a routine at this point?
No, routine can be heartfelt.
Yeah.
Like, are there days that I wake up and I'm not thankful for your mom? No.
Mm-hmm.
It's a daily gratitude. It's a daily gratitude that I get to live the life that I live. It's a daily gratitude that I get to pastor an incredible church. It's a daily gratitude that I have two amazing boys. And I'm thankful that we get to sit down and do this podcast together.
Yeah.
Right? It gives us time to just have conversation and hopefully add some value out in the world that helps other people.
Yeah. And I love how you said, put out value to other people, because that kind of segues into another, tangible item that we talked about, and that's producing more than you consume,
Yes.
to battle discontentment. This was so powerful for me, and honestly, I need to go back to doing it. But I took a whole month last January off of all social medias, all consumer platforms, and really just leaned into producing over consuming.
Yeah.
And man, I think back to that month, and it was one of the best months I've had, emotionally, spiritually, and a lot of facets in my life and other areas too. It led to good fruit. So I know there's truth to it. I just need to get better at doing it. But I do think I'm on the right track. What about you? Do you struggle with consumption outside of the food?
I think that we don't talk enough about gluttony in every sense, right? You were joking about the food. That can be a very real thing. But when you think about sin, when you think about crouching dragons, right? It's all about excess. And so can we become spiritual gluttons?
Yeah.
Where we just consume, we consume podcasts, we consume content, we consume books, and all of that stuff is good. It's powerful, right? But the problem isn't consumption. It's what are we putting out into the world?
Yeah.
What are we giving to others? Are we hoarding all of this to ourselves, or are you willing to share?
Yeah.
Right? Jesus shared with his disciples all the time.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't all about him, just consuming things. He's like, no, I didn't come to consume. I came to serve.
Well, I think that's a really valuable point. You think about Genesis 1, the fifth word ever written in the Bible was created.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, God created.
Right.
And I think that when you really dive into scripture and you see that we were created in the imago Dei, the image of God, that we too were created to be creators.
Yes.
We were created in God's image. The fifth word in the Bible is God created, the fourth and fifth word.
He's a creative God.
He's a creative God. And I think we're called to be creative people as well. And, not that consumption, like you said, is inherently evil, but I do think when it becomes more of a priority in your life over producing, that it can get really dangerous.
Well, hold on now. Now you're actually talking to people, right? Because I think that if we're honest with ourselves, the majority of people in 2026 are consuming more than they're producing.
Yeah. I mean, I would argue that I probably consume more than I produce.
Right. And so just that reversal of that, I remember that 30 days you took off of social media, and you were like, this is great. And you were actually to the point where you said, I don't know that I'll ever go back.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so tough for me because, my job is social media and marketing. And, it was really hard for me to stay off of it and still do my job and do my passions, the podcast and things.
Right.
But it's something I want to revisit and see if there's a way that you can still limit the consumption while still being able to produce on the platforms.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Do you think that contentment can be learned?
Yeah, I think that Paul gives us a great example of that, right? When he says, the most misunderstood verse in the Bible, in my opinion, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, right?
Yeah.
People use that as being able to obtain their goals and their ambitions. But that entire verse is about contentment.
Yeah.
It's about learning how to live in every situation you can go through.
Yeah. You got to read it in the context.
You do. I mean, you got to realize that Paul said in peril and nakedness, he said, I know what it's like to live in abundance, and I know what it's like to live without. And all of that stuff.
Yeah.
is peaks and valleys, peaks and valleys. Contentment steadies all of that. And I'm telling you, in this world today, people are looking for something that is steady,
Yeah.
something is sure, and that a lot of that is found in contentment,
Yeah.
being content in God. It's
Yeah.
just a steadying factor.
Well, I think it's like a really important that when you read Philippians 4:13, you read verses 11 and 12 too,
Mhm.
you know, in that context. And I think that something that's really powerful too is just a change of perspective that really everything in this world, besides God and his presence,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter. Like it really doesn't matter.
Right.
I know like money can make life easier
Mhm.
to your flesh, but it really doesn't matter. I love when Paul says, and I love this translation specifically, when he calls everything else in the world rubbish.
I love dung.
Yeah, that's your favorite?
Dung. Yeah.
I love the rubbish comment, and I'm like, you know, this is all rubbish
Yeah.
compared to the kingdom of God.
And I like, this is all crap.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
it's a crap show.
yeah,
Man. And, you know, it's not that we don't thank God for physical blessings. Obviously, we do.
yeah,
But that can't be our focus, because when those things become our focus, discontentment just breeds. And that dragon, it'll destroy you, man.
yeah.
Hey everyone, just taking a quick break from the show to remind you that the best way to support us and this podcast is by subscribing to the show, leaving that 5-star review, and just know that we appreciate that so much. And now, back to the pod.
Yeah, so we talked about, you know, discontentment.
Mhm.
We talked about entitlement. The last dragon that we have on our notes to discuss today is the dragon of hurry.
Okay.
And I think it's a really, really prevalent dragon in a lot of our lives. It seems like most calendars are full in this day and age. And what's interesting is we kind of like to wear it as a badge of honor,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like. So why do you think the world glorifies being busy? It seems like every time you ask somebody, how's life? Busy.
Busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is majority of the time, that is the answer you will get now,
Mhm.
right? This is a two-edged sword. This is one that can be a very good thing, but it can also be a dragon when it crosses over, right? And so I think that you have to watch when you're talking about that crossover,
Yeah.
because we should be hard workers.
Yeah.
We should be doing something with our lives. We should be going for it. I think that where it crosses over into a dragon is where the things that are truly most important to God become least important in our lives,
Mhm.
right? You hear of people that become so hurried in their lives, so busy in their lives, that they have no time for their family.
Yeah.
People become so hurried and so busy that they have no time for their personal devotion, their personal time with God. They become so busy, and the itinerary and the calendar so full that, you know, they use Sunday to, instead of going to church in the morning, well,
Now you're preaching.
I just got to rest. I just got to. No, you need to be in church.
Yeah. Would you say that there's a difference between being busy and hurried, though? Like, would you say busy is when the calendar is full and hurried is when the calendar is full and it rearranges your priorities?
Yeah, I think that, yes. Yeah, and I think that the busier you are, the more hurried you are,
Yeah.
right? And so it takes away from white space.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that God created us to have white space. We know that he rested on the seventh day, right? So he took time to have this margin in his life where he could, you know, I believe God thinks, he dreams, he's like, wow, you know, and we were created to do that too.
Yeah.
But if we have no margin in our life, I think that daydreaming is powerful, but not to the point where we just sit around and do nothing.
Yeah. I think one thing in my life I've noticed hurry start to affect the life around me is when it comes to intentionality. Like, I think hurry for me has less to do with what's on my schedule and more to do with what kind of place is my brain in.
Oh, that's good.
Because like for me, hurry, I can tell the difference between when I'm busy and hurried, because when I'm busy, I can still be engaged in who I'm talking to in conversation. But when I'm hurried, I start to be, my mind's in totally different places.
Yeah.
I'm totally not intentional. I'm totally not engaged with the person I'm sitting across from having a conversation. And I think that
hmm
when I think about my time in ministry, I want to ask about yours too. But I think hurry has affected sometimes my ministry because of the intentionality of conversations I have with people.
Oh, so the one-on-one conversations. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I think for me, that hurry would probably more affect the excellence
Mm,
of the leadership. I
mhm.
believe that leaders are called to operate in a spirit of excellence, not perfection. We talked about that last week, or last podcast, but to operate in excellence, I think that you can be busy and still operate in excellence. I'm not sure that you can be hurried and rushed and operate in excellence. I think that's where you're tempted to take a whole lot of
Yeah.
shortcuts that make a big difference. And we know that whatever we do, we should do it as if we're doing it for the Lord, right? And so I don't want to get to the point in my life where I'm so hurried that I'm not working as if I'm working for the Lord. I'm just working to get to the next calendar appointment. And, honestly, that's why this coming year is going to look a little different for me.
How so?
Well, you know that so I work a full-time job,
Mm.
pastor a church of 300 people. And then I coach multiple sports. I coach junior high football and JV basketball, and I love all of them. None of them are bad, but just this year, though, I've decided to take a step back from coaching junior high football, not because I don't love it or love the kids or love this community. It's just that something had to go because I was feeling so hurried, so rushed in everything I did that nothing was being done in the excellence that I think God's calling us to operate in this season.
Yeah. What do you think are maybe some warning signs? We've talked about a few, but some warning signs that you may be operating in hurry.
You become short with the people that are closest to you.
I can relate to that one a lot.
You can,
Yep.
right? So it seems like that even when we're hurried, that for some reason, and most people, not everybody, but we don't rush our time with people we come in contact with, people that are important. Everybody's important. We love everybody. But the ones that really suffer are the ones that we're super close with. We just have this, and well, they're always going to be here. They'll be here tomorrow.
Advantage of it sometimes.
Yeah, I think we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's a warning sign. I think that we need to listen to the people that are closest to us. If they're starting to feel that you're hurried and that you don't have time to invest in things that are important, you shouldn't get offended. You should just take a moment and listen and say, okay, is this a thing? Just have this moment of self-reflection. I love how David constantly invited God to seek his heart to see if there was anything in there.
Yeah.
I feel like for people that are busy, you and I are busy people, right? We there's a lot of stuff going on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I think that it's important for us to take those moments and say, God, search me. Is there too much on my plate right now?
Yeah.
One of the things that I struggle with as a leader is saying no. So when people ask me, hey, can you do this? Can we make time? Can we do it? My gut response wants to say yes so bad. But I'm getting to the point in my life where I'm able to take a step back and be able to say, not right now, not this week, maybe here in a few weeks, or realizing now that no is a complete sentence that is powerful for a leader. And there are times when we start things that are new and it's exciting. But I think we should have a moment where we sit down and we say, okay, what am I doing that needs to stop?
Yeah. How do you, I think I want to stay on this because I think it's a thing that a lot of leaders probably struggle with is how do you say no gracefully? We all don't want to hurt people's feelings, so how do you say no?
It's a very real question because we live in a world where people take things so personal,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of times a no is internalized and they don't like me. They don't have time for me. They don't want to do this for me. And it becomes so personal. So I think that to follow up your no, you take away the personal, that personal feeling that they may be feeling. And you say, I'd love to say yes, but right now I have to say no because my schedule will not allow it.
Yeah.
Right. And so we never lie to people.
Yeah.
Lying doesn't do anybody any good, but you also don't want them to internalize your no. And so you speak real about your no.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point because sometimes when people know you're just not lying, it helps a lot.
Yeah.
Like, because I had a
You can always tell when you're lying, dude.
and they can,
Yeah.
but I had a student a couple weeks ago ask me to grab lunch one day throughout the week. And I pulled up my calendar. I was like, dude, let me check. I know next week's crazy. I pull up my calendar on my phone, and he is over my shoulder looking at it.
Yeah.
And he sees it. He's like, dude, I had no idea that you were so
That you had that many
Yeah,
things on the calendar.
yeah, and,
Right.
you know, I didn't mean to show him my calendar. It just organically kind of happened. He saw
Right.
it. But the moment he saw it, I never felt bad about saying no, because you could just feel the shift in the conversation, demeanor.
Yes.
He understood. And the personal part of it that you were talking about,
Right.
he wasn't taking it that way no more, because he genuinely understood what I was going through that week.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
Something that really helps me with that as well is the moments that I do say yes to, counseling or meetings or things like that. I will try to put a time frame on them, and be honest and realistic about that time frame. Hey, actually, I do have some time this Wednesday between 6 and 7.
Yeah.
Right? That way you already have that time set out there, or if you have a half hour
Yeah.
between 6:30 and 7, we can meet.
Yeah.
I'd love for it to be longer, but this is the season I'm in.
Yeah, and I do think that most people, for the most part, are very respectful if you give them that time,
Right.
that you have a hard stop on.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one I struggle with, because I feel like when I dive into that white space that you talked about, I start to really feel bad about myself. And I start to really think, man, you're wasting all this time and you're not being productive. What's the balance between diving into some of that white space you talked about versus being lazy and just being unproductive with your life?
You remember when you were first starting into videography and photography, and there was all this equipment that you wanted, right? And we talked about the importance of realizing the difference between a want and an investment.
Yeah, I do remember that.
I think that as long as your white space is an investment
Yeah.
into the future, it's never wasted.
Yeah, that's really
Right.
good. Yeah.
I think that people get it twisted some, that white space is sitting in front of a television set for 4 hours,
Yeah.
and that's not resting.
Yeah.
I've never veg Netflix for 4 hours straight, and at the end of that 4 hours, got up and said, I feel great.
Dude, yeah.
I feel so rested. No, you feel sore, you feel wore out, you feel like, you just drained.
Yeah, I remember having yesterday, 2 days ago, I had a Saturday. First time in forever I didn't have anything. Man, Kayla and I, we binged 4 hours. 4 hours.
Yeah.
And to me, it was resting. But you're right. I never feel good about myself after sitting in Netflix for
You don't feel rested.
No.
You don't feel rested. Watch an episode, try it. You watch one episode, you turn it off and you go do something, you feel rested, right? I think that's something else that I heard. This isn't original, but I found it to be true in my life. I'm a juvenile parole officer, so a lot of my work is mental work, right? I'm working with people constantly. It's really good that after you get done with an 8-hour segment of doing something like that the best way to rest is by doing something physical. Whereas if it's opposite and you're out and you're laboring pretty hard, right, then the best way to rest is to come home and do something mental.
Yeah.
Right? Like maybe read a book, something like that. So,
Write a little bit.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to get in the practice of writing more and daydreaming, as you talked about. That's something I would like to implement. Wrapping up here before we get into closing thoughts, what is one practical step that someone could take to live a life that is less hurried?
Oh, gosh, there's a bunch. You're limiting me to one?
One. Well, just you can ramp off a couple. That's fine.
Yeah. I would say that your calendar is important. I would say that people who have no calendar are the most rushed people in the world. Use your itinerary, plan for some stuff, and also realize that other people's poor planning isn't your emergency.
Yeah.
Right? So if you limited me to one, I would say that your calendar is important.
Yeah.
If not, you're going to be all over the place.
Yeah.
And you brought it up. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added unto us.
Yeah.
What's your primary focus? Keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah. And on that, about the calendars, I guess one practical step I would add in is look at your calendar and try to find one thing that you maybe could live without. in your calendar.
That's great.
And just find one thing to maybe eliminate.
Mhm.
So yeah,
And it may be something you like with me and coaching junior high football.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's okay. Hard, but important.
Right.
One thing we always like to do before we close out the podcast is leave a moment of reflection for the audience and for the listeners. So, Dad, you want to take this away?
Yeah, so I think that it's important to realize the dragons that we battle with,
Mhm.
right? You and I have shared some of our personal ones, but I guess if I was to want anybody to leave somebody with a thought, it would be this. Which dragon are you currently battling against? Which dragon is crouching at your door?
Yeah,
And it could be a very real thing where you may not know
yeah,
because these dragons are so sneaky, they're so subtle. But remember, just like God warned Cain about the dragon crouching at his door, God will warn us. The Holy Spirit will nudge us. So take some time of self-reflection, self-awareness, and ask the Holy Spirit to search you.
want to pray us out?
Yeah. Father, thank you. Thank you for this episode, God. Thank you that you do give us those warnings of these crouching dragons that lurk at our door, God. Thank you for everyone that listened to this podcast. I pray that your blessing and your favor would be upon them, God. I pray that this podcast would add value to their lives, God, that it would help to change it. And we thank you for it all in Jesus' name. Amen.